So welcome, welcome. It's another edition. Is it an edition of HR Lunch Bunch? I'm your host. I'm your hostess with the mostest. My name is Deborah Jeffries. I serve as the vice president here at HR Answers. And our topic today is around manage, mentor, coach. Is there a difference? So, as I mentioned, my name is Deborah Jeffries, and we do HR Lunch Bunch the first Wednesday of every month, unless it happens to fall like on a holiday or there's a major HR conference on that date. And I like to be able to not be in competition with my HR fellow professionals and other activities. So I have my contact information here. If you want it or need it, please feel free. But truly, here's the deal. Uh, our goal is to have a discussion, which means we all talk to each other, sharing ideas, sharing information, what's working, what advice do you have for pitfalls to avoid in certain kinds of situations? So really the genesis of this has been a couple of decades in the making in terms of HR professionals being one, able to network with each other's with each other. Many of us are members of our local SHRM chapters, which is fabulous. I'm a total adoptee from 1990. I'm a member and totally support that. Oftentimes we didn't get a chance to really hang out and chat about a topic. We would listen to a speaker, we'd sit at a table, we might introduce ourselves. But this is a wonderful opportunity, especially with chat box and it's open. Feel free to continue the conversation with someone that resonates with you with something that they've said, or get to meet each other that you've not met before in some fashion. But I also encourage you, please feel free to unmute. Let's talk and engage, because this is the kind of thing where we get to learn from each other, and that's really what I'm all about, as well as maybe have a little bit of fun along the way. So I don't know what it was about today's topic that was kind of interesting to you, but obviously there was something that kind of resonated for many of you because there's so many of you on the call, and it's good to see. Even if I'm not seeing your face, I'm seeing your names, and some of you I haven't seen in a while, and some of you I've seen at an event or activity here in Portland. So it's been a little while. So welcome in. So I think that question is there excuse me, is there a difference? We could ask this question, and I could ask all of you, and I might get 10 different answers, right? And the words, I think, are often used interchangeably inside our organizations. And I think that's probably where one of the things that probably is most kind of disconcerting is, how are our employees defining these words? How are our managers and supervisors viewing these words, are defining them, interpreting them? Because if they're supposed to know what they are, or what the differences is, also then how are they approaching this? Are we asking them to do these things, but then they don't even really know what they're supposed to be doing? Or, well, you tell me, are you seeing, or are you feeling, are you experiencing that the words are interchangeable, or that our folks don't really know what these words mean or what you mean when you use these words? Your turn already. Weigh in and tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah, I've been here because I can't get my headset to work. Oh, perfect.
Well, we can hear you. Or we could hear you.
I'll chime in. This is Russ with the Humane Society. Yeah, and that's why I'm here today, is because it's these terms, they do get utilized. I guess they're interchangeable. And one of the things that we run into is having to define really what each of these are. You go to the Webster Dictionary and say, no, your job is to mentor, or is it to coach, or is it to what is the definition between it? And so when I saw this, I thought, well, I gotta jump in here, because I go to that a lot, and I think with a lot of the language we use, at least in HR that I use, and Really in our industry, we refer to some words that might have a little bit different meaning to I guess regular people when they come and visit with us. And so I think it's something that we got to be cognizant of to make sure that we are defining the words that we use. On the HR side, I think we have a little bit, might be a little bit more used to that, especially when we look at the legal side. A lot of the stuff on the WAC, Washington codes, they start out with definitions of all of these different words that they're using in their laws. And so I think in a sense, I feel I got to do that. But sometimes I feel like I'm over communicating when I do that. And
Mm,
so it's I was just asking, what does coach mean to you? What does mentoring mean to you? And we come to that
gotcha.
agreement.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Russ. Anybody else? Because I am going to ask you about each one of these words, but I was just trying to get a feel for if you're finding that there may be some confusion. Because my thought is that if we're asking them to do it, they can't do it if they don't really know what it means, or they think they are doing it. Because I really do think there's been an increased interest in mentoring and coaching, or the seeing the need for it. But then what does that really mean? And how important is that with the relationship with someone's supervisor or manager?
I mean, I'll go ahead and um, and speak a little bit.
Yeah,
I find
please.
so Elisa, I work for property management over by St. B's, CNR Management Group. I find that people nowadays are confused by the words. They think manage, mentor, and coach, they all are the same thing, but a lot of people don't understand there's a difference between managing people, there's a difference between mentoring them, and there's coaching. But you can be all three and still succeed. A lot of people think I'm the manager and I have to manage. Well, you're also a mentor and a coach to your employees. You're a great mentor, but sometimes you have to manage them and you have to coach them. So and also I haven't managed in a very long time, coach or mentored, since I stepped into the HR world. So now that I'm farther along and wanting to do more, I feel like I need a refresher on all these things myself. So
Gotcha. Well, and in some ways, you might be doing those things with your managers and supervisors, helping them help employees. Because sometimes
100%,
yeah,
100%.
yeah. So, and let's face it, I mean, coaching and mentoring helps leaders be successful, right? To have positive impacts on other individuals. And that's exactly what we're talking about in terms of working with managers and supervisors. Okay. All right. So I will just say that I put this in the little announcement about the program, is that from a webinar, one participant noted that mentors will answer your question, but coaches will often question your answers. And so one of the things that I think is big from a coaching standpoint is I have this philosophy about you can tell people what to do or you can ask people. So we have tell about or ask about. And coaching is more about asking. And I'm guessing with as many people as we have here today, that you probably have some supervisors who really think that they are doing a good job, and we can define good. But they're doing a lot of telling about, and telling employees what to do doesn't really help develop them. So it doesn't get them thinking for themselves. It doesn't get them problem solving. It doesn't get the curiosity going. And so I think that can be a thing. So let's dive in, and I'm going to ask you some questions, but if some of you know me and you spend some time with me, you know I like numbers. And so I did gather a few numbers for us. And just as a set the stage, I always will give a copy of the PowerPoint, and you get a copy or a link to the recording. So when you've been here, you get that sent to you post. It comes within a couple of days from Jennifer in the office. So just know you don't have to sit there and take pictures or feverishly write notes, but if you want to, feel free to, okay? But this was some research that was done. 73% of the respondents said there was not enough time devoted to coaching due to some of the other priorities that they have or other things that are going on in their world. 59% said managers avoid the difficult conversation. Okay, now I can't see all of you, but you do have emojis. How many of you know that your managers are avoiding those difficult conversations? Show of hands. I do a lot of work with supervisors. This is a big one. 49% said that coaching and mentoring are done too infrequently. So might not be able to capitalize on that. 43% pointed out that the low-level skills of those doing the coaching or the mentoring. So that would perhaps suggest that they don't know how, don't know the right approach, maybe don't know how to get the best out of their people, or thinking about like just the audience of one, let alone a team. How do I customize, personalize that conversation and that relationship and connection? And let's face it, you got to have some rapport and you've got to build trust with these folks. So let's talk managing. Let's talk managing. So you guys tell me. Let's define management. What would you put here? Trade places, be the instructor, be the educator. What are you telling your staff? This is that participative part.
I mean, I
This
guess
the
I'll
discussion
unmute
part.
and speak some more. I like to speak a lot. For me, managing, what I would tell people is my job is to manage, i.e. a department. Make sure things are running smoothly, make sure my employees are getting what they need. I manage the department as a whole. So I make sure that we function the way that we're supposed to.
Okay, good.
I think being a manager is more of the administrative duties. Making sure that everybody's lunches are covered, that PTO is taken care of. So when I think of it, those are the things that fall under that management umbrella, so to speak. The
Okay.
administration.
Okay.
I would
Like it?
I would say that being a manager is actually several different traits like in one, because you are an administrator and you are a leader, but you're also a trainer and a coach and a mentor. And in a lot of cases, supervisors might be that just that first line leader that an employee needs to go to for maybe a benefits question, or maybe a personal issue, or even like a professional issue, like um, an issue with like one of their peers or something like that. So sorry, that's not really a concise answer, but I suppose that I don't think being a manager has a concise definition.
See, and I think, David, one of the things that you're bringing up is that, again, how are we defining it, maybe as an individual, let alone our organization? And are we all on the same page? Because in some respects, it truly, I think in some respects, it probably doesn't really matter if we all have different definitions, as long as inside our organization, we're defining it the same way so that we're on the same page, we're going in the same direction. Because for some, management is kind of like planning, decision making. It could be leading and the motivation, kind of controlling our human resources, right? Corralling them, as it were, the financial or the physical. Because oftentimes people said we manage things, we lead people. So it might be that we're managing the information resources. So, whether you're talking about an operational component, an administrative component, right? What does that look like in that regards? So being able to think about jobs or tasks or the goals and helping people get there, the tools, the resources to make that a reality. I think that could fall into the category of a manager's responsibility, direction, support, maybe redirection if needed. So what is that? How are we defining that? Because if we think of that, if those things are some of our management, then how are we defining coaching? What's going to be the difference between managing and coaching? So what would we put in this box, as it were, this bucket?
I mean, I feel like this little slide says everything I want to say. It's like, it gives you all the things, but for me, it would just be coaching is to make somebody better, to somebody who wants to be better, teach them how to handle something better, going from being here to being just a little bit better, feeling better about the decisions you make, feeling better about where you're going, and just really putting it out there and asking, well, why would you do this? Why would you do this? Is just asking those questions for them to develop themselves into either the leader or manager that they want to be, because not everybody manages and leads the same.
That's true.
I can get you to a point through coaching of maybe how I do it, but you also have to figure out how you want to do it. How are you going to be a success leader? Because what you do and what I do, maybe they're the same. Maybe you learned from me and you became me, but eventually you'll find your own path too.
Interesting. Rosa, I saw you pop up. Does that mean you have something to say, girlfriend?
Hey, so when you pop that up, I also love all the words on there. But I thought of, so my role, I'm not an HR person, an HR manager role right now. I'm a career coach. And so this would be one of the things as I talk to clients about, hi, I am your career coach. I'm here to help support you through this transition process. And I am not managing you. You don't have to apologize for me for not getting your work done or any of this, but you can come to me and we'll talk about, well, what were the obstacles? What helped you not, what made it got in the way of you not accomplishing those goals that you said were goals? Is that truly a goal that you want? So that's how I think of my coach role, different from previous and manager, where I honestly went to household management because I'm also a mom and thinking about like keeping all of the things running here, which was similar in the HR role that I had of managing and making sure everything is running and knowing like when you need to delegate something. Versus coaching, like I think of helping people to fish, learn to fish themselves,
Right.
versus the managing that they are fish, they've caught enough fish so everybody can get food or the right kind of fish or whatever. So
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. Well, and I think that that's, one of the things is an important kind of consideration or maybe distinction is that there is I'm a single person inside an organization wearing multiple hats. And there's the person who's external that is, this is my job. This is the role I have. So in Rosa's consideration, she is a coach. That is her job. That's what she does, as opposed to someone who's inside the organization and they're the manager, a coach, a leader, maybe a mentor. So that being able to think about that, because I think that if we're putting on the hat of coach, a deliberate process, maybe a deliberate set of steps, approaches to getting to the point made earlier about getting someone to success, accelerated performance, or developing certain kinds of skills, elevating them so that they're ideally growing or transforming, getting better at something. So I think managers can use a coaching approach, but then again, maybe two different sets of approaches or styles or activities that would go with those kinds of things. And I think trust is going to be a foundational piece for both of those kinds of considerations. Oops, sorry, clicked the wrong button. Other thoughts that might, because you can even have like a job coach, right? Someone who works with you side by side for people in terms of neurodiversity. So that would be a kind of a different. So being able to think about when we say this, what are we really talking about? And in some respects, what brings the most value, benefit to the employee? So I think I didn't make that very big. Oftentimes I think coaching focuses on the here and now, present. We're not focusing on the past. So being able to self-awareness, set goals, being able to build skills. So a lot of how many of you, like show of hands or put up the emoji, how many of you have employees? Maybe you're working with managers or supervisors, maybe you're aware because they've come to you. How many of you have folks that you could truly say are not very self-aware? They don't know how they come across. They don't really see what the rest of us are seeing or hearing or experiencing. Okay, so I think that's one of those things where that could be an outsider. That could be very much an insider assisting someone. That could be a supervisor or manager assisting, but that definitely can be a designated, right? So being able to get someone, working with someone to grow personally and professionally. And in some cases, one will benefit the other when working on, I know when I've done some work with supervisors and some of the skills around communication and conflict resolution, those are skills that benefit you both personally and professionally. It's not just the workplace. So, kind of to Rosa's activities, there's different kinds of coaching, right? And some of these, I think, definitely organizational based that have great benefit to multiples versus maybe more of the individual. Some work related, maybe some not so work related. And the whole thing is getting towards the goal, setting goals, getting to them, accomplishing them, but what's going to be most effective? What ones are you guys doing inside your organizations? And maybe even some that aren't on here. What kind of coaching are any of your people purposely focus on? Are you bringing anybody in from the outside to work with anybody? And obviously you don't have to give us any specifics, but is there certain kinds of coaching you're bringing in or that you're specifically doing? Maybe even you yourself as the HR professional?
I mean, I'm pretty sure CRMG has HR Answers doing supervisory training for us. What?
What? Is that true?
So, yeah, so we have that going on for us. And then I mean, that's the biggest thing we've brought in is because we've recognized that our on-site staff, so people at our different properties, really struggle with knowing how to be a supervisor, how to have those conversations with employees because they usually manage between 2 to 7. And they just don't have that skill set to understand that, hey, you can take this skill set and you can turn it into this one too. But yes, we do have you guys coming in for us.
And it's our pleasure to do so.
And it won't be the last, and it's definitely not the first.
Good deal. What about the rest of you?
I kind of look at some of that as training. Maybe there's a line between training and this coaching piece. We've got a guy on our board, attorney on our board, that's going to be coming in speaking with our managers next week about how to have those difficult conversations and keeping it legal and above the floor. And so I don't know if I'd call that coaching, or I mean, I kind of refer to that as training, though.
Okay. Well, and depending on, it's one-on-one and it is helping them grow and become a little bit more educated in a particular area. I probably have a bias, and I'm usually pretty good about identifying my biases. When I think of training, I think of sharing information, but practice time, sharing the how-tos of being able to assist people, as opposed to just giving people information. You know, sometimes you go to a program, a webinar or workshop or something, and there's a lot of information thrown at you, but there isn't a lot of the how do I do that, or time to practice some skills or talk with others, some things to make it kind of sticky and useful and applied. And so trying to do more of that. And oftentimes training is ongoing. Like, what are we going to do after this? How do I make that sustainable in that respects as well? So, and that's what I think coaching is it's a more of an ongoing. It's not just a one time. And so when we think about our perhaps supervisors coaching employees, when we're asking them questions and they're giving us information or answers or their ideas or how they saw something or what they would do in a particular kind of situation, like, tell me how you got there and tell me what you were thinking when, tell me a little bit more about that. So we're just asking open-ended questions. They're giving us the information, which is actually giving us a lot more about where their head was and that they really do have the info. They really do know what they're doing. And sometimes they're being a little bit more tentative and maybe they're not as confident, and we can help build that confidence. That's exactly right. You were right on the right path. Your frame of mind and your thought process and your questions and where you went to go next in terms of information seeking was right in line with where I would have gone or what I would have done. That's exactly what I'm looking for. That's what I want you to do more of in the future. Keep doing that. And let's check in on the next project. You know, like, what did you like best about that project? What wasn't quite so wonderful? What would you do differently next time? So there's this, and then we have this project. So remember when we did that last year? So what did you remember about what we're going to do differently this time? So that it just keeps going. So there's opportunities inside working with to keep those conversations going. So I think that's and truly one of the greatest return on investments that we can have is, quote unquote, from research or studies or whatnot, is executive coaching. It really improves the performance of the organization's leadership, giving them the tools they need to be successful. Now, I think you can change the word executive to any kind of, quote, coaching when it's intentional. Keyword intentional, purposeful, deliberate. What are we working on? And that also means, I believe, that you have to have somebody who wants to be part of that, right? Okay, so managing, coaching, and this one I think should merit some good conversation in terms of what's mentoring, what's a mentor, mentorship, and are you doing any of this? What's a mentor? And how is
I
that different from the others? Go ahead.
go first. Like, I love my mentors. I think of the mentors I've had as individuals who've been where I was and are where I want to go. And so with that ideal mentorship relationship, to be able to see and learn from someone who's been there. But then the best mentors who also think they can learn from the mentees. So they're not just there to impart their wisdom, but really have that two-way relationship, which I appreciate. And Perma had a very unique one when they intentionally paired us with someone who was not doing the exact same thing. So I am in HR. I was an HR generalist that had more recruitment experience and hadn't done a lot with the compensation benefit side. Even though I had a payroll, like I had touched it a bit in my generalist role, but they paired me with someone who had that as their focus, and I loved connecting with her. Um, and she had never had the recruiter side of the role. So it was interesting to have that different relationship with, I never want to be a director of benefits and compensation, I thought, But hearing from her some of the things that she liked, I was like, okay, maybe I just hate payrolls processing specifically, but I could do some of the other pieces. So that was really unique. And I think it's so valuable that everybody should have a mentor.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, those lived experiences that they can share with you. Absolutely. What else? Got a lot of other people who are here with me today, here with us. What are you thinking? Well, and usually a mentor isn't, I think the best results are a mentor isn't someone who's your boss. Because I think that it can be a little, can I clearly silo the conversations that this is a mentoring conversation interaction time frame, and I'm here to help, maybe it's about skills or maybe it's about the profession or this particular area. Can I provide guidance? But it has nothing to do with what you're doing on the job right here, right now. And I'm not taking any of that into consideration, right? And yet I'm encouraging and supportive and in some respects helping the person self-discipline. I mean, willing and self-discipline and promotion so that the person that I'm working with has that energy and that drive and that, again, curiosity to want to be doing more or learning more in this area. So other observations, mentoring.
We use the word mentor, I guess, at a very a small level, but as more of a when we got a new person in organization, we're going to assign a mentor to show them where to park, and how to do where the break room is, and some of those kind of things for the first couple of weeks, so they know basically a little bit more about the organization. It's nice to know where to go eat, where's the closest bank, and where some of those kind of things are. And just kind of a little bit more of our culture, but it's not. I mean, I don't think it's nowhere near that definition of a mentor at a professional level.
Yeah, I almost, Russ, would probably put that as like a buddy, first couple, work week, first week, second week, I've got myself a buddy who's like
Yeah,
helping me navigate.
yeah, that's what I refer to it. Others refer to it as a mentor. But,
Okay.
it's some of those words. I had a little bit of military background, and everybody had their buddy in basic training, their
There you
battle
go.
buddy. But yeah, so it's it's working towards a definition of what we agree on it as.
Right. And again, part of that might be a little bit of the culture of the organization. What are we trying to create here in terms of the who we are, what we are, why we do what we do, and what does that mean? Other observations.
I mean, I'll go anyway. Um, one of the very first mentor I always had, she was a fill-in manager. So she was technically the store manager. She was an acting store manager. And then I had just finished some training leadership program, which put me into a specific position. But because of all this nonsense, I got stuck with her. And she always said to me, she says, I get it. I'm the fill-in manager. She said, but you and I are equal. We hold the same position titles. Even though I'm acting as a store manager, my job title is actually yours. You and I are equal. And so when we would go through all these things and she was mentoring me, like, oh, hey, we had this come up. What do you do? It would be, it wouldn't be, this is what I would do. It was, okay, Lisa, you're in my shoes. You have to make this decision. What do you do? And I say what I would do. And she goes, okay, that's great. Have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? what about if this happens? What if someone, we were in the retail industry. What do you do when you have someone screaming at you because a groomer cut your dog? Spoiler alert, I worked for a PetSmart for a very long time. Pet parents care a lot about their pets, and rightfully so. My groomer has cut my pet, and someone's screaming at you. What do you do? In the heat of the moment, they're yelling at you. How do you, and it was just, I really enjoyed that from her because it was a dialogue between the two of us. She was never like, I've been in this industry for 30 years. I know everything. It was, what would you do?
Yep.
And anything I would tell her, it was never, you're wrong. It was always, what about this? How do you think someone would react if you said this or if you did this? Or sometimes maybe my answer was even better. There was a definite age gap between us. Yes, I didn't have as much experience. She had a lot more, but I also had a different perspective. I was a different person. And so for me, that mentoring was, how would you handle that? And you're not always wrong. But at the end of the day, I wasn't above you, even though it was perceived that way. We carry the same job titles, we carry the same responsibilities. Just because you're here because of all this other external nonsense, if I'm not here, you're the one who has to make the decision.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, and those were all what I kind of call scenario planning kinds of questions, where it's like all these possible things because of their experience. They probably have experienced all of those things, and oftentimes you have not. And so even if we can just have a little bit of a upfront mind's eye, how would you handle that? You're going to be more apt and more prepared than you would be if you'd never ever had that conversation. The goal would be is that something clicks for you, like, oh, I remember that, right?
Yeah, and it
So
was about taking those skills and applying them to and making me think, okay, well, someone's cut a dog here. Now you have someone up front who's yelling about something totally different. And now that I'm in property management, we have residents who come to our corporate office and scream at our receptionist. You know what I'm saying? So like,
yeah.
and everybody in the back of corporate freaks out, and I'm like I'll be the first one to get up because I do know how to handle those things. I understand. I can treat that situation almost the same as if I cut your dog because I did have these different, okay, someone's screaming at me. What do we do? Okay, here's my A, B, C, D, E, F, G list. Where do I start on this depending on where we're at? So,
Mm-hmm. And as a complete aside, I am hearing from more and more people about the ability to have some skills on de-escalating conflicts, emotions, and things like that, that some folks are struggling with being able to self-regulate themselves with their emotions. And so some de-escalating skills, whether it's just in the office with a coworker, whether it's customers, someone on the phone. Our library systems are being challenged, and that's a kind word, with their day-to-day interactions with some of the patrons that are coming in. So I just share that with you as a little bit of an aside, because yes, 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 and yes, in terms of scenario planning or some internal training, conversation, brown bag lunch, whatever that can look like. Because in all of these cases, we are talking about a form of education in one fashion or another. So, and mentoring in terms of bridging gaps of skills, right? And so I throw this up as just kind of a picture, but being able to think about, we're building dynamic, skilled, and a focused workforce. I think that's a goal of all of ours. And what does that look like? And is mentoring a good option? It's an option. And then what does that really look like, or how best would we do that, in terms of being able to accelerate the growth of someone, or providing insight and knowledge, again, based on lived experiences, background, maybe even being able to help people focus or create some goals or see what's possible, right? I think that's one of the things that's kind of nice about that. Also, a different person, a different approach in terms of someone helping keep someone accountable, or in some respects, because the relationship is not a manager, helping reinforce the self accountability, like what's important to you or what matters to you, and how are you going to go about doing that. So kind of to Rosa's point, the mentor could be a little bit of that. You said you wanted to do these things. Are you taking steps to do that? Are you taking active steps? Are you thinking about these things? Are you aware of? So you shared that example with me. So from a self-awareness standpoint, how is that helping you get to where you said you wanted to be? So that accountability, let alone encouragement and motivation, that's coming from an outside source. It's not a peer, it's not their manager or supervisor. And sometimes they'll hear messages that the rest of us have been sharing for a while. That doesn't resonate. And I know I'm speaking some of you your language, because as HR professionals, you have shared messages inside your organization, whether that's to the C-suite, whether that's to your managers or supervisors, or to employees, until you're blue in the face. You invite someone from the outside, and it's like all of a sudden the angels start singing and you don't understand. I've been saying that for years. How come no one was listening to me? And the answer is, sometimes you can't be a prophet in your own land. But mentors can also be great at building connections or introducing people to people, building that network that might come along, right? And mentors sometimes will listen to those challenges or problems in a way that a manager or supervisor may have stopped listening in the way that they need to, and may offer that constructive feedback that, again, they'll hear differently, and maybe even some career advice that we hope is going to point them in the right direction. And maybe, just maybe, again, managers and supervisors can do this too, but avoid some missteps. Well, a mentor can kind of say, again, lived experiences. Usually there's they've been around the block a couple of times, to be able to say, some pitfalls might be, or you might want to consider. So where a manager and supervisor definitely can provide some career advice, some coaching, but that isn't typically their main thrust of responsibility. I think the really good ones don't want to lose good employees. We'd rather keep them inside the organization than having them leave. So being able to, I think the number one job of a supervisor is to develop their people, so that they are growing and learning and challenging themselves. But they also have to be juggling that with everything else that they're doing. So from a mentoring standpoint, there's all different ways it can be done. Anybody doing any of these? And one-on-ones, group, peer, distance, doing it electronically, speed mentoring, reverse mentoring, and there might even be a few that aren't on this list. What do you think?
I've participated in several of these, but I'm curious about speed mentoring. I've never heard that before.
We can talk about that. Anybody else doing some of these, or have concerns about some of these, or tried it and it didn't work? That's a good question. Someone's asking about reverse mentoring. And I almost went there when Rosa was talking earlier, but I decided I'd wait because I knew I had that little something for you. So let's go with reverse mentoring first, and don't worry, Rosa, I'll get to speed mentoring. So the idea around reverse mentoring really is the fact that typically mentoring is someone who is more experienced or seasoned. They've been doing things longer, either in that profession, career area, or with the organization or something. Reverse mentoring is going to be, instead of partnering with you with someone who's more senior, that you would partner with someone who's more junior. So the idea is that we're learning from our younger generation, people who are newer to, people who might have just come out of a specialty program or something like that, because there's newer technology, newer different ideas or ways of doing things. So it's not just quote up, but it can go the other direction. And to Rosa's point about what a program that Paherma had been running around mentoring and pairing you up with someone who wasn't in the same profession, being able to give you a little bit more diverse look at how we look at things and how we can learn from everybody. So that's kind of where the focus is, more of a junior team member, some working knowledge, some skills that quote a senior professional might not be as aware of, or maybe not had as much exposure to, and maybe not even as much comfort with. So hopefully that helps, and feel free anybody else to weigh in on that. and speed mentoring, Rosa, is more of an element of that it's going to have a much tighter time frame, that we're not necessarily doing something that's long and drawn out or over time, that maybe we're just focusing like on a particular area. So it's very short, very sweet. I mean, on one hand, it's not the same as like speed dating, but the idea is that they would be maybe shorter conversations. The target discussion would be very nuanced kind of thing, that it wasn't supposed to be more drawn out in that regards, is how I've kind of been exposed to that as a thought process. Okay. So I just think there's lots of opportunities in terms of how we're doing it. And so to even just get out of what maybe people have thought as formal mentoring, is that there's different ways of being able to approach this or do this internally, externally. And sometimes, let's face it, I'm guessing for some of you, maybe even someone has said something to you like, oh, I've seen you as a mentor. And you're like, what? I didn't know. And so you're just doing what you do or how you do it. You weren't doing anything specific or targeted. You weren't having formal conversations. You've engaged in conversations with the individual or individuals, and you're getting that kind of feedback. Because I think sometimes you might have been more intentional about something, or deliberate in your words or approach, or followed up with somebody if you knew that's how they were kind of viewing something. So I know plenty of people who have heard that phrase and they're like, I didn't know I was doing that for somebody, but apparently I was. And I think that's a high compliment and praise, right? So, and Rose is nodding that yes, that was her. So, and when you think about mentoring from the how can this benefit the organization? How do we help develop employees and managers into leaders beyond the role, but seeing that as something bigger, is being able to even how can mentorship help an individual succeed? Again, do they want to? Do we want to be doing something like that? Because it really does matter, and you guys know this, it matters who the mentors are. They have to want to. It has to be, I think it has to be more intentional and purposeful. The meeting should have a little bit of structure to them. If you're doing something formal inside your organizations, um, you should provide training to mentors about how to do it, to mentees about what does it mean to like go through some of this and do this. It's a great learning opportunity on both sides of the equation to expand skill sets, and who's accessible, what's accessible, um, and but it's truly an investment of time and energy, and making sure that people have that, because there be sort of, I mean, there's lots of things that would be worse in life. It's kind of not okay to say, yes, I'll be a mentor and then not be available to somebody, or that we're supposed to meet with X amount of regularity and it keeps getting shortchanged or something. So, are any of you running formal mentoring programs within your organization, or you've been a mentee? Do you have some feedback or some pitfalls for people who might be thinking about these things that you can share?
Well, Russ earlier talked about uh, military back. Had your buddy, so it was kind of like a peer mentor.
Right.
I was also a long time ago in a similar situation, and one of the benefits of it, I think, is that it is kind of like what you mentioned earlier, where just having it from a different voice or from a different perspective is possibly more relatable.
Mm,
But then as you just said, like any words of caution for people who might be considering it, as I would just say, like you want to make sure that you have a good role model being that peer mentor, because you want to keep perpetuating good habits, right? But
yes.
it can definitely be valuable if you get a good tenured employee to be in that role, and you can get good buy-in from the new employee who you're pairing them with. Because sometimes getting it from a peer perspective really can be um, really beneficial to newer folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Other observations, or are some of you wanting to create mentoring programs inside your organization at all?
Oh, sorry, previous slide, I was gonna say, um, in some of my other relationships with mentoring that I had seen certain documents that making sure um, people go through it carefully, that the documents are helpful for
Do
for
you
the
mean,
relationship, but also making like there needs to be some kind of outline, because I do have a mentor right now that I'll put in quotes that doesn't do anything for me, and I regularly have to reach out, but was given to me, or she was assigned to me, um, that hasn't really worked out as previous mentoring relationships has. And all of this being like, oh yeah, I really should follow up and figure this out more, in going up the chain to how they initiated this mentoring process, and it's too fuzzy for all of us involved. So
yeah, and that's, then it breaks down the process, and I'm guessing then it's like, this really isn't working for me, and depending on how that all got set up, it's kind of like, I'd like to say goodbye now. I'd like to opt out. This is, you know, that's one of the informal ones. You didn't even know it was happening, so you didn't know you got fired, so to speak. But at the same time, that's why you want, it's an investment of time and energy, and if you're not willing to do that, and if that's why there's and so it'd be interesting if people had and willing to share, and I'd be happy to send those out with the PowerPoint afterwards. If you have a sample like agreement or write-up or guidelines or something like that with any program that you might be doing with mentoring, that everybody's on board, which is why a lot of times people need to have training for a mentor, the mentee, what to expect out of that. There's oftentimes a bit of a like a little onboarding, a get to know you gathering for people and such, so that everybody's kind of on the same page about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So as we, and just because the official time of 1 o'clock hits, that doesn't mean that people can't still hang out and chat or talk with each other and get to know each other. So I want to extend that courtesy to all of you. But being able to, think about, you know, when with these 3 words in terms of what are we doing with our people? What are our managers and supervisors thinking? Do they have the right kind of skill set, tools in their toolbox to be able to be equipped for what we're asking them to do? And I mean, I think that a lot of times these roles definitely can overlap, and that does us. If I just stick with the word manager for a moment, do they understand that they're doing certain things at certain times with people, or is it just all blending into one? Because I think they need to be more purposeful and intentional with that. And what are they adopting? What are they doing? What's the purpose behind it? What's the goal they're trying to achieve? How are we as HR working with them to make sure that's true? And in a lot of respects, are they listening to the employee as effectively as they could? Because oftentimes employees are asking for help in it using their vocabulary. And that should be the little bit of the spark that says, ooh, this would be more of a coaching conversation. So even though we have our regular check-in meetings every week or every other week or once a month, I want to make sure we carve out X amount of time to walk through this. I'm hearing you say these things. Are you looking for some assistance in, and that we really have those kinds of conversations with? So that good, effective communication of truly listening and engaging, which also takes time. So we know that research shows that these kind of engaging conversations gives us better engaged employees in terms of clarity of what a manager, what they do, why they do, how they do it, and what they're needing from employees by setting good expectations and building in accountability. So my question to you kind of is based on kind of what people have shared today, is there something here worth working on? Is there something here worth sharing with other people? Or if there were many of you from the same organization getting together and chatting a little bit and saying, is there an opportunity for us to be more clear or more specific in what we're doing or how we're doing it, or. So I'm always hopeful that some of these conversations spark future conversations for you with others inside the organization. So I definitely want to invite questions, additional conversations. I will just let you know that next month we're going to talk about boosting employee skills and what are we doing and how are we doing it, all the ways that we can boost skills. I'm working with a gal by the name of Kira to come in. I think we've identified that she's coming in July. We just did that this morning, and then a couple other topics that we have scheduled coming up as well. They're not really scheduled. I just thought we would talk about these. And I'm always, always, always open to other topics that are going to be meaningful and purposeful to all of you. So I would encourage you to let me know what would matter, what would be helpful, what would you like to chat about? Because if it matters to you, I promise it matters to me too. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to officially wrap up for the recording. And then if we want to chat, we can chat. So thank you so much for being part of this one. Again, my name is Deborah Jeffries with HR Answers, and this was the April version of Lunch Bunch, HR Lunch Bunch, talking about managing, mentoring, and coaching. And I'm glad that you were able to join us all today. This was wonderful. It was good to see so many of you. And we will call that a wrap for the recording.